Hi, I'm Karen Garvey. By now you probably know that my specialty is using intuition to help people have a happier life, and also to teach intuition so that you yourself have the tool to navigate your life more swiftly and abundantly. What I've noticed is that even people who think that they're not intuitive usually have one area where they stay connected to their inner wisdom or universal truth or that voice that guides us. For me, before I started to peel off the masks and layers of the human experience and kind of recover from some challenges in childhood, I had a lot of areas where I was completely disconnected from my own intuitive ability. And over time and with practice and dedication, I reopened those areas. But there was an area that I accidentally stayed open. And I know that because it was an area in which I found I had success, meaning a result that I wanted. And that was in parenting. So you would think if you had kind of a lot of challenges in childhood that maybe your parenting would skew toward a rejection of everything you'd been taught and you would go to an extreme there. Or if you were still more asleep, maybe you would echo everything and repeat some detrimental practices that had happened with you. So I know that I entered into that space of raising my 3 kids with intuition because I did neither. I didn't reject everything, nor did I echo everything. I found this place in the middle where I responded to an inner feeling, an inner guidance system. I think it was wisdom as I look back on it, because the kids they're happy, they're well-adjusted young adults. And that's the consequence of, I believe, intuitive parenting. So let's talk about intuitive parenting for you. What can you do to help yourself get a better experience while raising your children, and more importantly, kind of help the evolution of your children becoming happy, responsible, good citizens, filled with self-esteem? How do you get there? It's a joy when that happens and when kids connect with their own worth. But how do you get there? It's not easy. They don't come with a manual. And interestingly, even if you did read a manual or two, every child is different. So when you think you nailed it with the first kid, the second one comes along and tells you that everything is different, so we're starting from scratch. And that's the reason why using intuition in this area is so beneficial, because it doesn't matter what age your children are, and it doesn't matter what gender or whatever they're born in, and it doesn't matter how many children you have. You can enter into the space of coming at the process from an inner knowingness. It doesn't mean perfection. It means that this guidance system inside of you will help you navigate some of those really big challenges of being a parent. I know that I oftentimes heard these different tags for parenting, like helicopter parenting or tiger moms. And I found those terms to be very short-sighted. They showed a lack of flexibility in adjusting through intuitive approaches to raising children. If you're going toward any extreme at all, you're not really accounting for the specificity and the uniqueness of your individual child. So what I see as the role of parenting is that we're like the bumper guards when you are bowling, right? Before you really learn how to get that ball down the lanes and knock over some pins, before you can really navigate that heavy weight, you need the guards. I still need the guards, but you need the guards to help out. And that's what parenting is all about. It's just giving some extra assistance to guide our children as they're developing their levels of maturity so that they can navigate their own way to the success of dropping down those pins. There are as I see it, 6 areas in which our children mature. So let's take a look at each of these maturities and see how we can use intuitive parenting to help our kids navigate them. The first is intellectual maturation. The second is social. The third is emotional. Then we have financial, spiritual, and physical. Those are the 6 areas in which our children will develop, and every child develops at a different rate. You can say that there's probably a rough period in which most of them will get to the bulk of their maturation, maybe from 16 to 21. But in some of those 6 areas, your child is going to fall outside of that typical skew. All of our children are going to mature physically, so there's not a lot that you can add into your intuition about the process of physical maturation. But there are some areas that it's beneficial to think of yourself in terms of the bumper guard as your child is maturing. So physical means that they're going to go from being, not to be unkind or anything, but a little blob that's 100% dependent on you, to being walking, playing, running, moving, using their muscles, becoming more alert and aware and more able to navigate farther and farther away from you. So in the child's physical maturation, there is areas in which intuition is going to help you to become an optimal parent for that child. And the first thing to think about is overcome your desire to be a bubble of protection at all times to your kid. It's so important that your child learn to figure some things out by themselves within basic safety guidelines. They've got to learn their way around the world. The process of being human to begin with it's a game of what if. What if I do this? What will the result be? What if I do this? What will happen? And children, that's all they do all day, is they try things out, and that's how they bank information and the echo back of what they've done to see what they want to do next time. Do they want to repeat something, or do they want to try something different? But if you put such a bubble of protection around them, and they're prevented from practicing their what ifs, they're going to make a world smaller and smaller instead of larger and larger. Your opportunity here is to grow the grandness of possibility for them. I understand, with having 3 children, how much we love them and we want them to be safe. But if you always regard excessive concern for safety over nourishing your child's desire to adventure and to trust their own ability to choose and to make their world bigger, then you're going to wind up with someone that has a very, very, very small world when they grow up. So let's look at some examples. I have a gap in the ages of my kids, so I almost feel like I parented in 2 different generations. So I have a really interesting backdrop of parenting at this age and then parenting in this decade. So I get to see differences in parenting at wide and how parenting itself has changed. But I do remember when any of my 3 kids were young and I would take them to the playground when they were toddlers, I was really the only parent there for the most part that was letting my kid fall. Other kids were like other parents, they were like a mat from a gym, running around underneath them, everything that they did, and catching them and holding them and helping them with their hands. But I figured, hey, we've already gotten to the point that the world made this park pretty safe. They got those soft little cushions underneath. I'm going to let these kids figure stuff out, figure out where they can climb, get that feeling of courage, let them take an extra step. Doesn't mean I didn't spot them age appropriately, but like I said, the bumper guards are supposed to be something that eventually you lift when someone knows how to roll that ball down the middle. But they're only going to learn how to roll the ball down the middle and strike a pin if you give them the opportunity to do so. The bumper guards don't go in front of the pins, do they? No, they go along the sides. They're guides. You are your child's guide. So the first thing is to let your children move. I always got a kick out of that when my kids were little. I always figured, this was part of some plan that we made them when they stand up on their feet. We made them like little. They're like pint size because they've got such a shorter amount of space to fall. So when they fall versus me falling, it's not going to hurt so much. They're more bouncy. So let them fall. Let them fall. They're going to get right back up. Let them fall. They're going to get back up. And that's how they learn. That's how they learn how to become more adept in their own bodies. That's how they learn that they can do more, see more, be more, climb more, throw more. Let them experience the fullness of those bodies. In addition to wanting to be an intuitive parent during the physical aspects of looking at the safety needs of our child, other areas of the physical growth and development have to do with just good habits that you're forming with your child and their nutrition, their sleeping patterns, and how you teach them about navigating the world of taking care of their own bodies. The best way to guide a child with nutrition is again to help your child to follow what they like within certain guidelines. One thing I was amazed by was years ago, I took a class in Korean and Laos cooking, and I kept waiting for them to get to the breakfast menu because I never could imagine eating kimchi for breakfast. So eventually, our teacher who was born in Laos explained that the meals that we were learning to cook were the way children in Laos ate morning, noon, and night. They might have been a little heavier on the fish at dinner time, but they were still eating, kimchi and different meals like this early in the morning. And a light bulb went on that we're the ones that introduced certain limiting possibilities of the broadness of what our children can experience food-wise by having set ideas of what it is that children should be eating at certain times of day. For one, I rarely eat what we would see as breakfast food, and if I do, I'll eat them when I want them, whether it's later in the day or in the morning. But taking a look at the value of the nutrients that our children are getting on a regular basis will help form lifelong habits. I also read how the American diet, especially through packaged foods and so on, carefully introduces sugar and processed sugar at a very, very early age. And that's to create an abundance of profit for them in the future as we keep going back on an addictive level to those particular foods. So the first thing I would say is intuitively, it feels nice to think about the earth is here in its abundance to help us grow. It grows everything out there and it's designed to grow us too. Laboratories were not necessarily designed to help us grow. So intuitive parenting means if you have a natural child and natural foods, the two of them are going to go hand in hand and support one another. Of course, we're busy and there's a lot to think about. And even the notion of parenting naturally with food choices, it might conjure up the obstacle of how do I prepare? How do I wash everything? How do I cut everything? How do I dice everything? I don't have time. I don't have this. And you start to feel like, well, maybe I'm not a good parent. But in today's world, there's ways, especially with so many videos on the internet, there are ways to figure out how to simplify having good food choices available for your kids. One thing that I also did, and this was definitely in hindsight an intuitive choice because I see the relationship my children have with food today. I didn't love having to prepare a breakfast and then prepare a lunch and then prepare a dinner. So what I did, and I did this out of convenience, was when they were pretty young, I used to prepare like platters of food, and I would put a platter out midday. And it would have, depending on my mood, it would have usually 6 to 8 choices of little finger foods on it. And I had these 2 basic rules. If it's mealtime and you choose a food, you would have to take 3 of the really vibrant foods for every not so vibrant one you took off the tray. And if it were pure snack time, the rule was 2 to 1. So I might have a little snack cracker or something, a little sweet or a little gummy, what do you call those things, those little fruit things. I would have that as a choice, but I'd have it among cherry tomatoes or small carrots or something with peanut butter, whatever. And so my kids would come through and they would graze. And they would eat when they were hungry, and they'd go back to playing, and then they'd come back in and they'd eat something else. And I was new at this, so I used to kind of watch from the corner of my eye. Will they eat 3 before they take the little mini chocolate covered pretzel? And sure enough, they would. They would take 1, 2, 3. And then the 3rd, and 1, 2, 3, and the 4th, and then the 4th. And I was amazed at how self-regulating they were, and I was amazed at how I didn't have to guide them or reprimand them or yell at them or forbid anything or monitor. As long as I gave the directive and I allowed them to believe that we were living on trust, and I trusted that they would make good decisions for their bodies, they always did it. It was amazing. So there's 2 things we learn in raising the physical aspect of our children is you can trust them too. So one day, one child might eat all of the cherries and none of the carrots. And the next day, one child might eat all of the, chicken on a toothpick, but none of this. I also trusted them to guide those differences and those changes. But the most amazing thing of this technique of feeding the kids is that they grew up to know when they're hungry and know when they're full. The most amazing thing is I'll have a meal there for my son, and he'll eat and eat and eat, maybe approximately the same amount of food for that particular meal every time. And at some point, he pushes the plate away, he puts his fork down, and he's like, I'm done. And that's it. He won't take another bite. And the kids have turned out to be very natural in their ability to not overeat. They've learned to listen. So intuitive parenting to help your children grow physically and to be strong and healthy physically includes trusting your child as well. And trusting your child, it's not only appropriate to do that in partnership for eating and food choices, but it's also a good idea to trust your child somewhat as far as their sleep needs. Every child has a different amount of sleep and rest that they need daily. I'm convinced that my first child tricked me into having others by sleeping long and hard, early in the evening till late in the morning. And then the next one was like, is it 6? Is it 5:45 in the morning? Let's get up, let's play. But you can't make that child go to sleep till 8 in the morning if she's ready to get up. So trust your child's sleep needs too, especially when they're younger. Don't compel anything in particular, but set the tone. Be consistent, and be consistent. As long as you are consistent, your child will form and develop a good understanding of when they are tired, when it's time to rest, when it's time to tuck in, and they'll also consistently understand what a bedtime routine is, which will launch them into that phase when you get a break each day. One thing you can kind of see is happening is even as we talk about the physical maturation of a child when they get to different developmental ages in their bodies, you can't kind of extricate the emotional, social, and spiritual and intellectual aspects that are maturing at the same time. So next we're going to be looking at how a child develops physically and grows up, but we're going to look at it more from an emotional perspective. How can you use intuitive parenting to help your child reach emotional maturity? So please hit the notification bell and you'll be aware of when we'll look at intuitive parenting for the emotional development of your child.